Welcome back to Story Junkie, the channel where real stories cut deep and the truth hits harder than fiction. Today's story is one that will make your blood boil, break your heart, and, I promise you, leave you nodding slowly at the end. It's a story about a mother, her children, financial fraud, elder abuse, and the quiet, devastating revenge that came when no one was looking. Stay with me because this one goes all the way. I want you to picture something for me: a yellow house, small but proud, a front porch with a wooden swing that creaks just right in the summer, window boxes full of geraniums, a mailbox that my husband Gerald painted himself twice because the first time didn't suit me and he laughed and said, "Maeve, you'd repaint the whole world if I'd let you." That house was everything. We built it from scratch. Not literally, of course, but in the way that matters. We poured 32 years of mortgage payments into it. We raised 3 children inside those walls. I learned to make bread on that kitchen counter. Gerald died in the bedroom at the back, the one with the good light, the one he always said smelled like me. That house wasn't just a house. It was the proof that our life had meant something. My name is Maeve Callahan. I am 74 years old. And for 2 years, I will carry in my body like an old fracture that never quite healed. I was robbed, and I don't mean by strangers or some faceless criminal in the dark. I was robbed by my own blood, by my daughter Kate and her husband Dale, and by the time I understood what they had done to me, I was hungry, cold, isolated, and so beaten down that I had started to believe I deserved it. I want to tell you how it happened. I want to tell you every detail because I think there are women and men listening to this right now who are living in that same fog, who have been made to feel stupid, dependent, and grateful for crumbs. And I want them to hear what I did about it. I want them to know that 74 is not the end of the story. Gerald died on a Tuesday in March. He had slipped on the tiles in the shower, hit his head, and died from blood loss. I heard the loud thud and ran as fast as my aching body could carry me. He looked at me with those pale, watery eyes and kept apologizing right up to the end for leaving me with so much to manage alone. I kept telling him to hush. I kept telling him I would be fine. He slipped away before the ambulance arrived. I believed it when I said it. I had always been capable. I ran the household accounts for 30 years, raised the children mostly on my own while Gerald traveled for work, organized the church bazaar for 16 consecutive years, and served on the neighborhood association board. I wasn't a woman who needed looking after, although my bones were stiff at times. I knew that about myself. But grief does something to you that I wasn't prepared for. It doesn't just make you sad, it makes you stupid. I don't mean that unkindly. I mean that my brain, which had always been sharp and sure, suddenly felt like it was working through wet cement. I forgot appointments, I left the stove on, I paid the electric bill twice and didn't notice for 3 months. I lost 6 pounds in the first 2 months because the thought of cooking for one person made me want to sit down on the kitchen floor and simply stop. Kate noticed this. Kate, my youngest, my only daughter, the one I had always been closest to, she noticed and she came. At first I was grateful. I was truly so very grateful. She arrived in May, 6 weeks after the funeral, with Dale and 2 suitcases and a casserole dish. She said they had been worried sick about me rattling around in that big house by myself. She said they had talked it over. Her and Dale and my 2 sons, Robbie and Declan, and everyone agreed that she should come and stay for a while, just until I found my feet again, just to help. I should have asked more questions. I should have called Robbie and Declan myself to confirm this conversation had actually happened. I should have done a great many things. Instead, I stood at the door of my yellow house and I cried with relief because my daughter was there and the loneliness had become its own kind of pain. The first month was fine. Kate cooked. Dale fixed the gutter that had been coming loose since November. They were good company in the evenings. I started sleeping better. I told Robbie on the phone that having Kate there was the best thing that could have happened to me. The changes came slowly. That is the thing I need you to understand. Nothing happened all at once. It crept in the way cold does. You don't notice it until you are already shivering. First, Kate suggested that she manage the household bills. I was still making small errors like a forgotten payment here, a miscalculation there, and she framed it as a kindness. "Mom, you don't need this stress. Let me handle it. You focus on resting." I handed over the account information. I handed over the password to my online banking. I handed over the credit card that Gerald and I had kept for emergencies. I handed it all over, and I felt, heaven forgive me, relieved. Then Dale started talking about the investment opportunity. Dale was a salesman, always had been. He sold medical supplies for a company in the city, or so he said. He had a particular quality that I now recognize as dangerous. He was the kind of man who made you feel intelligent when he spoke to you. He didn't talk down to you. He laid things out plainly, let you ask questions, nodded seriously at your concerns, and then gently, methodically dismantled every reservation you had. He said he had a contact, an old college friend who had started a private investment firm. Boutique operation, very exclusive, not open to the public. The returns were exceptional. He showed me documents, charts, quarterly projections. The minimum investment was steep, $50,000. But with Gerald's life insurance settlement sitting in a savings account earning almost nothing, didn't it make sense to put that money to work? Wasn't I always saying I wanted to leave something for the grandchildren? Kate sat beside him while he talked. She held my hand. She said she and Dale had already put in 20,000 of their own money. She said she wouldn't recommend it if she didn't believe in it completely. She looked at me with those eyes, my daughter's eyes, the ones I'd watched open for the first time in a delivery room, and she said, "Mom, this is for your future. This is for all of us." I signed the forms. I transferred $50,000. There was no college friend and no investment firm. There were only Dale's hands and a bank account that didn't belong to me. Over the following 8 months, using the financial access I had given Kate, they transferred an additional $47,000 from my accounts in small, careful increments. Amounts small enough that they rarely triggered alerts, spread across multiple transactions, disguised in the records as utility payments, home maintenance costs, grocery bills. My pension was redirected. My savings account was drained in stages. The emergency credit card accumulated $11,000 in charges, furniture, electronics, a weekend trip to a resort in the mountains that I was told was a business trip for Dale. By the time I began to notice the numbers didn't add up, they had taken just over $108,000 from me. $108,000, the sum total of my security, Gerald's life insurance, 30 years of careful savings, gone. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why didn't you just look at your statements? Why didn't you ask? And I understand why you're thinking it, because before this happened to me, I would have thought the same thing, but I need you to understand what they did to my mind before they touched my money. It wasn't accidental, it was architecture. Within 3 months of Kate moving in, I was no longer receiving my own mail. Dale had changed the mailing address for my accounts to a P.O. box he controlled, using a change of address form he had filled out and submitted without my knowledge. My paper statements went nowhere I could see them. My email account, the one I had used for years, was upgraded to a new one Kate set up for me, and the login for the old account was quietly changed. I was told regularly and casually that I was confused, that I misremembered things. Kate would say it with a sad smile. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday, don't you remember?" And after a while, even when I was sure we hadn't, I began to doubt myself. Was I losing my mind? Was the grief worse than I thought? I started writing notes to myself and then losing the notes. I started sleeping too much because waking up felt like climbing out of concrete. My boys called, but Kate was always nearby when they did, and she had already primed them, carefully and methodically, with concerns about my mental state. "She's struggling more than she lets on," I later learned she had told Robbie. "The doctor is worried about early cognitive decline." There was no doctor and there were no concerns, but by the time Robbie called me, he was listening for symptoms, and every time I stumbled over a word or forgot a date, he noted it. And the food. I want to tell you about the food because this is the part that still makes me shake. Somewhere in the second year, the household grocery shopping had been consolidated under Kate. She did the buying, she controlled what came into the house, and I began to eat less. Not dramatically at first, a smaller portion here, an empty pantry shelf there. But over months, what reached my plate became meager in ways I couldn't fully articulate. I was given the leftovers of what Kate and Dale ate, often cold, often not enough. When I said I was hungry, Kate would look at me with that sad smile again and say the doctor had recommended a restricted diet for my heart. There was no doctor. There was no recommendation. There was only my daughter, withholding food from a 73-year-old woman in her own home. In the winter of my second year living this way, I lost 19 pounds. My hair thinned, my hands shook. There were days when the hunger was a physical thing, a hollowness in my stomach that made it hard to concentrate, hard to think, hard to do anything but sit in Gerald's chair by the window and stare at the geraniums I no longer had the energy to water. I was cold all the time. Kate kept the thermostat low. Energy costs, Mom. We have to be careful. And I couldn't reach the panel to change it because it had been moved to a wall in the hallway that required me to step over a box Dale had left there and had never moved. I wore Gerald's cardigan over my own cardigan, and I still shivered. My joints ached, my fingers cracked and bled at the knuckles. I want you to sit with that image for a moment. A woman in her own home, cold and hungry and alone in a house full of people, while her daughter, 2 rooms away, sat on a leather sofa, purchased on my emergency credit card, watching television on a 65-inch screen, also purchased on my card, and ate a full hot dinner. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I always remember Tuesdays differently now. Gerald died on a Tuesday, and now this happened on a Tuesday too, and I have decided that Tuesdays are the days my life changes. I had dropped a pen behind the small writing desk in my bedroom, Gerald's desk, the one I kept because it smelled like his hands, and when I knelt down to retrieve it, I found, wedged against the baseboard, a bank envelope. It had slipped there months ago, clearly. The address sticker on the front had been removed, but the account number was mine. It had been opened and retucked messily. Inside was a statement from 3 months prior. The balance shown was $11.40. I sat on the floor for a long time. My knees hurt, my stomach was empty, and for the first time in 2 years, the fog lifted just enough for a single thought to cut through with absolute clarity. Something has been done to me. Not, I must have made a mistake. Not, I must be confused, but something has been done to me. I folded that statement into the cup of my bra. I got up off the floor and went to the bathroom, ran the tap loudly so no one would hear me thinking, and I made a plan. I had one advantage they had not accounted for: my neighbor, Dottie Pierce. Dottie was 81, a retired schoolteacher, fierce as a terrier, and she had been watching what was happening at my house for months with increasing unease. She had tried to raise it with me before, but Kate had always managed to be present when Dottie came over, and I had not had the sharpness to read between Dottie's careful, worried words. Now, on a Wednesday morning when Kate was out and Dale was at whatever he was actually doing with his days, I walked across the street to Dottie's door for the first time in over a year. I must have looked terrible. Dottie took one look at me, pulled me inside, sat me at her kitchen table, and fed me a bowl of soup that I'm not ashamed to tell you I wept into. Real food, hot food, a full bowl. I cried so hard she had to hold my hand until I could speak. Then I showed her the statement, and I told her everything I could remember. Dottie had a grandson, Brent, who was a detective with the city police. She called him that afternoon. He came the next morning in plain clothes. He listened to me for 2 hours with a notepad and a very still face, the face of a man who had heard terrible things and had learned not to show it, and at the end he said quietly that what I was describing was elder financial abuse, fraud, and possibly criminal neglect. He also said that I needed a lawyer. He gave me a name, a woman named Celeste Adeyemi, who specialized in financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. He said she was relentless. He said it like a compliment. He wasn't wrong. Dottie drove me to the appointment herself a week later, while Kate thought I was at a doctor's visit Dottie had arranged as a cover. Celeste Adeyemi was 50, sharp-suited, and had eyes that missed nothing. She took my documents. The one statement I had found, my original account records that I had remembered, were stored in a safety deposit box Gerald had opened in 1998 and which Kate didn't know existed, and a handwritten timeline I had compiled over 6 days with Dottie's help, and she spread them on her desk. She was quiet for a very long time. "Mrs. Callahan," she said at last, "I'm going to need you to trust me completely, and I'm going to need you to go home and behave exactly as you have been behaving. Can you do that?" I told her I had been surviving 2 years of that already. A few more weeks wouldn't kill me. What Celeste built over the next 6 weeks was meticulous and unassailable. Working with Brent and a forensic accountant she brought in, They reconstructed every transaction, every transfer, every manipulation of my accounts going back to the month Kate had arrived. The paper trail was damning. Dale had been sloppy in the earliest months. Larger transfers, less careful concealment, and digital records don't forget the way old women supposedly do. The investment scam was traceable. The P.O. box was in Dale's name. The change of address forms bore forged versions of my signature that a handwriting analyst confirmed were not mine. The account that had received my $50,000 investment was a personal account Dale had opened in a different city 3 weeks before the pitch. On a Thursday morning, not a Tuesday this time, but close enough, 2 police officers and a financial crimes investigator arrived at my front door. Celeste was with them, so was Brent, and standing at the end of my front path was Dottie Pierce, wearing her good coat. Kate and Dale were arrested. They were each charged with elder financial abuse, fraud, forgery, criminal breach of trust, and in Dale's case, wire fraud at the federal level, which carried considerably more serious sentencing implications. Kate, it emerged during the investigation, had known about the investment scam from the beginning. She hadn't been a passive beneficiary, she had been an active architect. My 2 sons drove in the moment I called them. Robbie arrived first and stood in the kitchen of the house where he'd grown up and shook his head for a long time before he could speak. Declan cried openly, which surprised me. Declan had always been the stoic one. Both of them had believed what Kate told them about my decline. Both of them carried guilt about that for a long time. I told them that was Kate's debt to pay, not theirs. The civil case moved quickly alongside the criminal proceedings. Celeste filed against Kate and Dale for the full amount fraudulently obtained, plus damages. Their assets, the joint accounts, Dale's car, the equity in the house they rented, the furniture, the television, all of it was subject to seizure and liquidation toward repayment. The 65-inch television was sold at a creditor's auction. I heard it went for $140. Kate received a prison sentence of 4 years. Dale, due to the federal charge and his prior history, a prior history I hadn't known about, a bankruptcy and a dismissed fraud charge from 12 years earlier, received 7 years. His parole eligibility wasn't for 5. They left my house with nothing. They left in handcuffs on a cold morning, Kate crying and saying my name, and I stood on the porch of the yellow house with Gerald's cardigan around my shoulders, and I watched them go. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt hollowed out. I felt the particular grief of a woman who has been forced to become the agent of justice against her own child, and that grief isn't simple. It doesn't resolve neatly, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never lived it. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt like myself. Not all of the money came back. The civil recovery returned $62,000 of the $108,000 taken. The rest had been spent. Celeste pursued every avenue available, and she is still pursuing residual assets to this day. But Robbie and Declan stepped in, quietly, without fanfare, without making me feel like a charity case. They are good men, and Gerald would have been proud of them. They helped me stabilize. My pension was restored. My accounts were reopened in my name only. The mail began coming to my door again. I watered the geraniums. It sounds small, but it wasn't. Standing at those window boxes with a watering can, feeling the sun on my arms and the solidity of my house beneath me, that was the first day I felt genuinely safe in 2 years. I gained back 14 of the 19 pounds. My doctor, a real one, not the one Kate had invented, said my blood work looked better than it had in years. He attributed it to reduced stress. I didn't tell him the full story. I didn't need to. Dottie Pierce comes for tea every Wednesday. She never says, "I told you so." She is the finest friend I have ever had, and I intend to tell her that every week for as long as we are both here to have tea together. Before I go, I want to say something directly to anyone watching who might be living in a version of what I've described, or who has an elderly parent, grandparent, or neighbor they haven't checked on in a while. Elder financial abuse is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world, and the overwhelming majority of it is perpetrated not by strangers, but by family members and trusted caregivers. It thrives on isolation, on shame, and on the fog that grief or illness can create in a sharp mind. It doesn't require the victim to be confused. It only requires that someone close to them is patient, strategic, and willing to exploit love. If you are elderly and someone has taken control of your finances, your mail, your medication, your food, or your access to outside relationships, that isn't care. That is captivity. You have the right to your own money, your own voice, and your own front door. Please reach out to a trusted person outside your immediate household or contact adult protective services in your area. You're not imagining it, you're not being difficult, and you are never too old to reclaim what belongs to you. If you are younger and reading the signs in someone you love, an elder who seems withdrawn, who echoes what a caregiver says, who has unexplained weight loss or appears to be living in inadequate conditions, trust your instinct. Ask the quiet questions. Make the call. My yellow house is still standing, my geraniums are blooming, and I, Maeve Callahan, am still here. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed financial abuse of an elderly person or experienced it yourself? Did the family see it coming, or were they blindsided the way my sons were? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story reached someone who needed it today, please share it, because sometimes the most important thing a story can do is land in the right hands at the right time. I'll see you soon on Story Junkie. God bless.